know once we are live, and then the chair can take over.
We are now live.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. And welcome to our virtual board meeting. We unfortunately continue to hold these meetings virtually and look forward to the day that we can meet in person. There are a few housekeeping items to keep in mind. We're streaming the public portion of this meeting live on our YouTube channel. If we happen to experience any technical difficulties with the live stream, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube. To those who are in attendance, your microphone has been muted, and I ask that you put your hand up if you'd like to speak, and we'll retain a list of speaking requests. Once you're called upon to speak, please unmute yourself and proceed. We ask that you please keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking. And as it relates to voting, please raise a hand to indicate your vote when a vote is called. Should you be disconnected from the video call, please rejoin using the link previously provided. Okay, we will now begin the Peel Police Services Board meeting on June 25th, 2021. I'll first begin with a roll call. I believe everyone's here. Yeah, Ron has joined, so we have the full board is here. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none, we will continue with the meeting. I'd like to take the opportunity to begin a bit differently this time. We would like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather, in which the region of Peel operates, is part of the treaty lands in the territory of Mississauga of the Credit. For thousands of years, Indigenous peoples inhabited and cared for this land and continue to do so today. In particular, we acknowledge the territory of the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe Chippewa peoples, the land that is home to the Métis, and most recently the territory of the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation, who are direct descendants of the Mississauga of the Credit. We're very grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, give our respect to its first inhabitants. As we've not been including the acknowledgement in the past, we will be making sure to do this going forward. And with the recent news reports, I also want to acknowledge the pain the Indigenous First Nations community is in with the discovery of the 250 children in Kamloops and now 751 in Cowessess Nation in Saskatchewan. Thank you for allowing me to do that. The next item is our Chief's update. And so I'll now call on the Chief to provide the board with his update. Please, Chief.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to the board members and our guests. We're looking forward to hearing the presentation shortly. I do want to acknowledge that there are a few operational updates that I'd like to share with you that have occupied our time in the media. I think it's important for me just to highlight a few. Clearly, in a region our size, where I had the opportunity yesterday to jokingly say to regional council that there are days that I wish that another municipality could occupy CP24 more than Peel region, but we do have a lot of incidents and operations. One of which I wanted to highlight, which had an impact to our larger and broader community, is the murder of Ms. Sangeeta Sharma. Which is a significant high-profile homicide that occurred in August of 2020. We have had a successful arrest previously, which we announced, but again, as you see in media, there was a second arrest that was affected due to the relentless work of our Homicide Bureau and investigators. This individual was found in Alberta and returned. This investigation is a complex one, and we are still continuing. And absent that, Nick, I'm not sure if you had any updates. We've had a couple of significant homicides recently.
No, Chief. As you mentioned there, the homicide and missing persons unit has been incredibly busy. the arrest yesterday is actually the 6th person that they've arrested for homicide in under a month. Now, some of those homicides date back to the year previous, but certainly worth acknowledging all the hard work of that team. So we appreciate that.
Thanks, Nick. And subsequent to that, I think, as we know, Chair Unica and I had a conversation about the public's constant attention to significant investigations and where Peel Police is involved with real complex investigations that are protracted over a period of time. We, since September of 2020, have experienced various shootings. We see them in the news. Our officers, although year over year, year to date, we've seen a reduction in the number of shootings. The number of rounds discharged at each of these incidents continues to increase. This week, we announced the conclusion of our Special Enforcement Bureau, combined with 21 Division, and taking down a group of, from a drug trafficking standpoint, to rival gangs. As a result, the details are on our media release. Several firearms were seized, and multiple offenders that are homegrown were arrested. And this is a narrative that, we once in a while announce these large gun and gang investigations, which, we put the table display for the media to see, and we answer lots of questions and show, sort of the baseball card photos of people that have been involved. But these investigations continue repeatedly and are sustained by our divisions and our investigative teams. And I think it's an important thing to highlight as part of our overall strategy to respond to them. It will always involve, being tough on the hardest criminals and us putting our best effort to negate what they do in our community. In fact, as of this morning, we anticipate another media release for a subsequent investigation, which yesterday there were multiple search warrants, both in Peel and Toronto, using our various teams, with additional search warrants seized. Again, two, we want to call them lower tier street gangs that have been engaged in a dispute since 2020, which have resulted in several shootings that, our community and nonetheless our counselors and everyone hears from. And I think what we have to recognize is that regardless of our overall broader statistics on trends and where we're going, people's perceptions of public safety are what drive their feeling of public safety. And I think it's important, for me to take this small deviation on top of all the great work that our organization is doing during challenging times to highlight some of these outcomes. With that, I just wanted to pass it on to Deputy Andrews as it pertains to some discussion on our divisional mobilization unit. And then after that, Chair Datia, be happy to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Chief. As a sort of outflow from previous discussions and yesterday's regional council presentation, I just wanted to update the board on the role of our divisional mobilization units, which we had spoken to at the offsite late last year, conceptually, but which has been stood up in actuality for the past 3 months. This is a 48-person, non-enforcement, non-investigative, non-traditional unit that is a proactive, pro-social public health support unit with a mandate that is aligned with the community safety and well-being framework. The DMU officers are deployed directly from the divisions and connect with members of the community and have interactions for the police that matters, that negatively impact our social determinants of health. This includes people experiencing homelessness, food and employment insecurity, as well as newcomers to the country. Their engagement and interactions are driven by data and are community focused. DMUs also attend post-major events, and this is directly related to some discussion that we'll have a little later on today. Whether these events are shootings, which the chief has spoken to, and some of the incident response piece that we do as an organization, we do so well. But the post trauma impact that those shootings have on our community, our DMU units are equipped and capable and able to respond to support our communities, the affected communities, to offer information and to quell feelings of the negative impacts that we have on our community. DMU also work directly with our regional mobilization unit officers and provide that tiered response and wraparound services through our situation table and our multi-sector supports and community partners. And these are referred through human services agencies or elevated to the regional situation table. The events in London triggered our participation by DMU, and there's going to be an opportunity for us to discuss the more fulsome response that was undertaken by PRP later, I believe, in the meeting. But I want to sort of seed with the board that down the road, once we've had a chance to accurately assess the data and the impact of our DMU units, we'll be presenting to the board a really fulsome discussion of the impact that this non-traditional unit is having, and that is really connecting with our community and has the ability to respond to the needs of our community that were identified by a number of councillors at yesterday's regional council meeting. Thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Mark. And with that, Chair Tia, I can happily turn it back to you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for those updates. Are there any board member questions or announcements before we get into the agenda? Okay, seeing none on my screen. We'll move to our first item, which is the approval of the minutes of the meetings held on the meeting held on Friday, May 28th, 2021. Can I have a mover to approve the minutes? Mr. Bowden, seconded by Mr. Chadha. All in favor? Thank you, everyone. It's been carried. The second item is a deputation. The deputation was submitted by the Stop Police Profiling Group, and it was included in the agenda today for everyone to read and for the public. Are there any comments from anyone on this deputation? Okay, seeing none. Can I move to receive this deputation? Can I have a seconder? Okay, Councillor Medeiros, all in favor? Okay, thank you. That's been carried. We'll now move on to presentations. We have a number of interesting presentations today and some important leaders in PO Police Service who will be presenting them. And we want to thank them for doing all the work and preparing this for the meeting today. The first presentation is on organizational leadership strategy. It will be presented by Superintendent Dirk Niles and Ms. Heather Clayton. If you can please begin your presentation.
Thank you, Chair Tia. And I guess, Dirk, do you want to share a screen? Or Heather's got that? Thank you. Perfect, thank you. So thank you, board members, for the opportunity to have a relatively unusual presentation being provided to you in the public portion. And I wanted to baseline the discussion here. When we began our strategic plan last year, we wanted to focus on our community, our work, and our people. And those are three themes that, as I told regional council yesterday, and as I tell our people and us as an executive team try to emulate, is our focus is to modernize our community policing approach, to be innovative and flexible. And a lot of what we have presented to the board are outward facing activities to adopt community safety well-being, to try new things that is a non-traditional way to policing, to be innovative and flexible, not just from a strategic standpoint, but from a technology and innovation platform. But the third big bucket, which is our people and our work, is one which deserves an equal amount of attention. And today's board meeting, I'm pleased to say that both presentations are about the investment of our people. And I want to say, the relevance to our community is that, you've heard me say, if we're not good on the inside, we're not good on the outside, meaning the more we invest in building, on the amazing, traits and characteristics of our civilian and sworn members, all 3,200 of them, the better we're able to serve the public in a variety of different ways. I have said time and time again, Canadian policing is the most best trained, nationally, internationally. Our Ontario Police College, Canadian Police College, all our deliverables and skill sets from an operational standpoint are quite amazing. But the shift to leadership development is a different piece, which in my perspective, leadership drives the success of an organization. And part of my commitment to the board, our commitment as a team, is to make sure we develop everybody here. So I want you to draw your attention to this picture because, this is what, on the face, what traditional leadership looks like, right? I think people think about the military and policing, and when we are in a ceremonial stand or in incident command, we operate well from this paradigm that the image shows right here with a new recruit class saluting me. But I want to use this to juxtapose what we're trying to invert. We want to create an environment where we also develop capacity and leadership skills so that we are the most effective police organization internally and externally. And part of that is my commitment to you and the board is to develop leaders here right from the time they enter or are onboarded, civilian or sworn, is an investment in their growth on soft skills that have hard impact. And it's not done on its own. It's incumbent upon us as a leadership team to build a framework and a roadmap. And jokingly, I've said to the board is, you've developed a leadership team here. Some of us, like Mark and Sean McKenna and some of the remarkable people well, have had a stellar career here and have, whether they advance through their ranks or are in a particular rank for their 30 plus years, we want them to be their best. But, that term that nothing grows when it's left out on its own is absolutely true. And so the view here is to build a program and a framework to make sure that we serve this community for years out, post any of us that are on this Zoom call, and that we can assure that we, from a leadership perspective, have individuals that understand that to be good on the inside means we need to be good with our teams, each other, our community, and that's how things stem. So with that, we've had the privilege, and I think Dirk, just let me know if you're doing the official introduction of Heather, or if you need me to do that. I'm turning it over to you at this point.
Thank you, Chief. I will take care of the introduction of Mrs. Clayton. And good morning to the chair and to the members of the board. As the Chief has said, I'll be presenting today and co-presenting with Mrs. Heather Clayton on our leadership development program. The Chief has already addressed why leadership matters, and that'll be a theme throughout the entire presentation. I'll then cover the organizational strategy and how we've come to our current state of being. I'll then introduce Mrs. Heather Clayton and highlight some of her expert collaboration, which has been essential to driving what we've done to date. We'll move on to a high-level 5-year plan, providing the board with an overview of where we are and where we intend to be. And lastly, I'll close with Mrs. Clayton on the impact and the benefits that we're already realizing as an organization. So about a year ago today, just to the Chief's point, he approached several leaders in the organization with his vision to create a leadership strategy that built on organizational capacity in 3 distinct areas. The first was to create an opportunity for all civilian and uniform members to develop their leadership competencies. The second was to give those leaders that said capacity to meet the challenges of both today and what we anticipate we'll see in the future. And lastly, to design a robust succession plan with the aim of developing our members from their date of hire in the organization to their date of retirement in the organization, and implement a scaffolding approach that would see a trajectory of leadership follow them throughout their career. So in order to do this, we took an innovative approach and we created the Leadership Development Advisory Team, commonly referred to internally as the LDAT. And this group, it was comprised of both civilian and sworn members with incredible skills from all levels and all areas of the organization, bringing their expertise to the group. And we took an opportunity to integrate the findings of the culture survey that was taking place simultaneously, thereby giving voice to the concerns of all members in the organization, and we used the results of the survey to inform our leadership program strategy while focusing on meaningful change. But the real power of the group came from the chief and deputies who, to the chief's point earlier, was to create real authentic engagement with the membership. The chief and deputies for a 12-month period met with the members of the Leadership Development Advisory Team, sharing their knowledge, sharing their expertise, and joint strategizing with us. But they did it not as an executive management team, but as peers, and demonstrated exactly what we want to embody throughout the organization. So collectively, the LDAT developed 5 pillars that we wanted to embed throughout the leadership program. The first will address mindset shift, providing all members with the growth mindset and the ability to transform and change. The second was empowerment of all members to enable them to lead from anywhere in the organization, regardless of how they contribute to the organization or in their current role, and to inspire others. Third, we were focused on behavioral change, both internally and, of course, more importantly, externally, in how we're going to serve the community. We wanted to embed a coaching culture throughout the organization and teach all members how to lead from a coaching perspective. And lastly, and most importantly, create accountability both to oneself, to the organization, and most importantly, to the community. Now, this has been an accelerated journey, and the only way that we could see us moving to this platform in as quick a time as we did was with the expert guidance we received from Mrs. Heather Clayton and her team. So I'll just provide the board with a little background on Heather before turning it over to her. So Heather is truly an amazing individual who is driven by her passion for people and their development and her expert collaboration. Her work with our organization has been essential to making us the most progressive service in Canada. And Heather has worked in a professional capacity, both as an educator throughout Canada and Australia, at all levels of the education system, where she has utilized her formal training in her master's in leadership, her international accreditation in leadership coaching to build programs for individuals, teams, and organizations. And just on a personal note, I've worked with Heather closely for the last 12 months. She is a pleasure to work with, is always bringing the energy that's needed for this work, and has a knack to bringing out the best in people. So on that, I will turn it over to Heather.
Sorry, just advance my slides. Thanks so much, Dirk. Such kind words. Thank you all for allowing me to be here today. I'm very excited to share a bit of a snippet of the work that we've been doing. As you all know, leadership is complex. We need leaders who are nimble, innovative, and responsive to this complexity we find ourselves in. And in policing, it's especially so. So the leadership work is crucial. The chief spoke it today, and we've often heard him say, not good on the inside, not good on the outside. And it's interesting that research around awareness, that idea of being good and knowing yourself on the inside, really is powerful around the importance of that. One study looks at self-awareness and says that a high self-awareness score is the strongest predictor of success for leaders. Pairing awareness in teams, another study said leaders with high self-awareness create high energy, high-performing teams 92% of the time. But listen to the opposite. Leaders in low self-awareness, unaware of their impact on others and bringing that to the table, create negative climates 78% of the time. We must pay attention to this leadership work. We can't afford not to. And so we've worked this year in a variety of ways, which I'll be describing, to kind of start with that inner awareness and build out from there. You'll see some of the quotes on the screen. We have many of folks that found that they are more self-aware, more aware of their impact, feeling like they're having more of an impact, which is an important thing for leaders. We also measured some shifts in mindset by completing the phrase, I used to think, and now I think. Again, we have many, but I love the one on the bottom that says, I used to think I was a good leader, but never really focused on leadership itself. Now I think focusing on leadership is key to individual, team, and organizational growth and effectiveness. As leaders, we don't spend too much time in that space before we realize that team is also important, specifically senior leadership teams. And both the chief and Dirk have referenced this. Senior leadership teams need to be able to model, be transparent, and support the work. A number of my colleagues and I often talk about, you go into an organization and often the senior team says, we need leadership development, but we're good, work with those people. This is not what we found here. And in fact, many of the members that I spoke to who were participating in the leadership development spoke to and pointed to the work of the chief and the deputies, both as inspiration and a compelling reason to embrace their own leadership work. In addition to the leadership work, the chief and the deputies have also been working on and exploring the idea of a high-performing or high-value creating team. This is a really teeny graph. I wouldn't expect you to read it, and I just want to highlight a couple of things. It speaks to 5 key areas that teams need to have as they seek to be high-performing, obviously in service of those that they work with. The blue is where the team started last year, and the green is where they are now. What you will notice is they moved forward on just about every point. There was growth, there was learning. And what you also need to know is they started high. Anything above 3, this is a 5-point scale, is high. And so they're intentionally working on getting clearer about how they work together, how they engage with stakeholders, and how they build their own learning. Research says only 10% of senior teams are high functioning. About 50 to 60% are mediocre, and about 20 to 30% are actually quite terrible. 10% of senior teams are high functioning. You are so fortunate, I just want to say, as someone from the outside working on leadership across various places, you're very fortunate to have a team that's not only high functioning, but also keen to continue their own learning, but also to support the learning of others. Through this work, we also built a model. Remember, we're talking from the inside out. This can look quite overwhelming. And so I'd like to start us actually in the inside of this model. We used our work with the LDAT team, as Dirk mentioned, had input, used research, and this is what we came up with. We are leading from the inside out. And so paying attention to some of those factors on the inside are really important. Things like values, mindset, harnessing our strengths and the strengths of those around us, being mindful, having a vision, building trust, all really important inside pieces. It doesn't take very long before we realize as leaders that we're influencing others. And this happens in working with just one other person often, mentorship. In policing, we have the coach officers or mentors happening. And so we wanted to pay attention to leading individuals as well. We expand then into leading teams, again, wanting to harness the best from our teams. How do we share leadership? How do we manage conflict, deal with feedback? How do we be innovative? How do we take risks? And how do we listen and question deeply in a coach-like way? Finally, this all bubbles out and supports the leading in the organization. These are the things we stand for, and building the structure this way guarantees that we can support the organization. I think what's most powerful, though, is the final ring, leading in the community. And this could say leading in the community, it could say leading with and for the community. Everything that happens inside these circles is designed to make us strong, outward facing as we do the work we're called to do. So hopefully now, as you look at that model, it's not so overwhelming and you can see how we've landed where we have. We're using this model as a bit of an aspirational vision to create the plan and the program that Dirk and the team are working on to support all members. For this work, I've been really excited to bring a number of excellent coaching colleagues and resource to the project. Dr. Catherine Carr is a researcher, author, and has provided ongoing support. Her expertise is in teams, high-performing, high-functioning teams, but also in coaching. And so she has been an amazing resource for us, attending some meetings and she and I have worked together on a number of the pieces. The other three coaches here also have extensive background, and one, Mike Atkins, is currently working with the military on the West Coast as they seek to build a similar leadership development coaching program. So we can see where it's happening across the country. We're realizing the importance of this. You'll be proud to know that although these coaches have lots of clients, they are so excited and they feel like the work with their Peel clients is their favorite. They say that these leaders show up every day, keen, interested, and ready to do the work. And they can see that work translating. So it's very exciting. So how did we do this? How did we kind of build this idea of awareness and inside out using the team, working with a variety of folks? We've done it through a number of groups meeting together, and in that building common language, common skills, common understandings of what we want leadership to be and how we want to enact it. It's not theoretical, it's practical and applicable. And although built on research, really things that people can pull into the work that they do. We've mixed sworn and civilian in various contexts, and that has enriched the conversation, again, impacting culture as well as leadership. We've also run some sessions for women in leadership with that idea, again, with inside out, being strong and leading from wherever you are and feeling empowered in that way. This is exciting, transformational culture work. In this first year, we have clocked over 1,000 learning hours together and impacted 80 people. We've also had about 150 coaching hours. So exposure to new skills, the opportunity to apply and practice, and the strategic reflective thinking space that comes from coaching are all key elements that we have seen have a strong cultural impact and leadership impact in the organization. So that's what we've done to now, and we need to look forward to our key next steps, which Dirk will share with us.
Thank you, Heather. So just at a high level, as Heather's explained and as we've spoken about, we're still completing the research and development phase, which we started in 2020 and will take us to the end of 2021, including focus groups, expert collaboration, and some implementation of some internal strategies. In 2022, we're prepared for organizational rollout and implementation through authentic engagement and feedback from the membership by conducting a force-wide survey, canvassing what the organization is looking for and how we can serve them. And then at the same time, we'll be building our robust succession plan with the intention in 2023 of full organizational integration, embedding the coaching culture while maintaining continuous improvement and evidence-based evaluations while establishing our KPIs. Can I go to the next slide, please? Thanks, Heather. So the last year, to the Chief's point, has seen massive change in the organization, and the impact and benefits have had a momentum and a fulfillment throughout the organization through our leadership strategy. The work that we've done with Heather has helped guide leaders, has created momentum in developing our CSWB plan, our innovation and strategic initiatives, our partnership with the OHRC to address the current racial justice movement, while giving our members the strength and competencies to meet the challenges of the community. And lastly, through our body-worn camera program, which focuses on building community trust, which is essential to our goals. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. And just prior to opening to the floor for questions, I'll turn it over to Heather for closing comments.
Thanks, Dirk. So we've been tracking data and learning, and we'll be telling the first chapter of this Peel leadership story and some journal articles for leaders this fall. We also made a proposal about a month ago to author a chapter in a book that Dr. Peter Hawkins, who's renowned around the world for his work with high-performing teams, offered. We heard this week that we've been accepted, and so Dr. Carr and the chief and myself will be crafting a chapter in the next month or so for that book. As I've spoken with others outside PO, people who understand policing, leadership, culture, it's become apparent that the work Peel is doing is unique, courageous, and necessary for the community in which they serve. Remember, changing a culture takes 3 to 5 years. And with the learning and the shifts that we've experienced this year, it's hard to believe we're only 1 year in. So I want to thank you for the privilege of working with this amazing group of leaders and their teams. And thank you for your attention this morning.
Thank you, Heather. On that, Chief, I'll turn it back over to you, and then we'll open the floor for questions if there's any.
Great. Thank you, Dirk. And thank you, Heather. Heather, I appreciate your time and your comments today. And Dirk, and for the board members, I failed to acknowledge that Dirk was recently promoted to the rank of superintendent, and happy to have him and his team and working in this space. I just want to say the significance of relaying this to you at the board, because it could easily, based on, if we unpack the HR aspects of it, could have fallen into in-camera, is one that we felt important because the board's role in terms of governance and oversight is to ensure that there's growth and depth in this organization from a HR and a staffing perspective, but also to align with the board's vision of making sure that we look after our people and equip them in a variety of different capacities. And there is no real paradigm for investing in leadership that is out of the box. So we're constructing that here and building it. And the reason we felt that it should be in the public session is it's also our investment in the community to say that we don't just expect to hire the best and have them on the end of a 911 call or at somebody's doorstep. They have 30 years, maybe, or more, where we need to make sure that we invest in them. So I trust that this was informative. We know that I will continue to have conversations with the board in a variety of different capacities as it relates to individuals and growth in our programming. Thank you, Heather and Dirk, for highlighting the work thus far. I think it's a great piece as it pertains to our 3,200 strong here.
Thank you, Chief. I guess we can now open it up to the board. I see Mayor Crombie, your hand is up. Please go ahead.
Not only that, but I learned to use the little hand in the in the participation booths, whatever that is, their column. Anyways, I hadn't seen the presentation, so I think this is new to us. If I did, I missed it, but I think it's the right direction to go strategically to focus on leadership. I agree with the motto, the leadership matters. That's so key, that's so critical for us. And Chief, when you were hired, I think there was an element of, we really do need to change up the corporate culture, enhance the morale of the service. And you've really done that. We have a very strong team. You have a great team around you, and that's pretty evident. And more importantly, you're developing a lot of bench strength too, and that's critical. So I think you're going in the right direction to focus on leadership and to develop opportunities that can grow our team and provide them with the development and leadership opportunities that will really deepen their experience, so that it can be stronger contributors to the team. Not that they're not. Everybody is. We've got, as I said, a great, strong team, and I like the focus on developing leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship.
Chair Ianika, go ahead.
Thank you. Further to the mayor's comments, I'm blessed. I've got a brother that's got a doctoral degree in this line of work, and he and I chat regularly. And what he pounds into my head is, doesn't matter what line of work you're in, doesn't matter what your business in, the most important decision you make as any corporation isn't this strategy or that strategy. It's who you're hiring and who you're training to move through the ranks. So I agree with Bonnie entirely. This is the most important thing that we do. And if you get it wrong at the front end, you'll know about it in days or years to come. So a great initiative on behalf of the chief. And I agree, Bonnie, that's why he's here. The other thought that I have, a little bit anecdotal, it's ironic to note that I read in the morning papers that the top 20 leading goal scorers and the top 20 paid hockey players won't be playing in the Stanley Cup next week. Interesting. So the greatest individual goal scorers, and they get paid more than anybody. None of them made it to the final. It may be the two tallest teams in the league because they're teams. Just a bit of an anecdote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Bowden.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Chief, and your team, what you're doing with this is exceptional. As somebody who built a business from the ground up to $100 million in annual sales, I can tell you that it is all about the training. You can hire mediocre people and make them good people or great people, and you can hire good people or great people and make them exceptional. It is all about the training. It's about retention as well. And Chief, you know, because you have been to my place, it's the environment that you have and making everybody know that they're important and they have a place and that they have a future. They see that there's no future if there isn't that training and that leadership and that progression within an organization, whether it's my organization or your organization. People don't perform when they see that there is a path and that they can advance through PRP. You will have the best people in the world, and I applaud you and the team and what you're doing. It's outstanding. So thanks for the presentation. It's great.
Mr. Bowden. Anyone else? Maybe I'll take an opportunity here. Just if you can give more clarification on the method and the scope. So specifically, is this one-on-one coaching with senior leadership? And then number two, is it limited to the CMG and I think there was a number there, 22 senior, people in the senior leadership, or is this something that's gonna, get pushed down through the structure? So just a bit more clarity on what we're doing here.
Sure, I'll probably hand it to either Heather or Dirk. And Dirk showed a slide for a multi-year plan. The multi-year plan is intended to saturate the principles of equipping people in leadership training throughout the entire organization. We've really embraced and adopted this concept of got to lead from the middle, lead from the front. We clearly set the tone at an executive level, but we also, the hard work is off the backs of the civilian and sworn members throughout this entire organization. So the plan is to build I think the term bench strength was used before, is to cultivate and develop that bench strength. And so the work that Dirk is doing for this, this leadership development framework is what he's pulling into place. What we've done is pull Heather in to begin to, bake the, what are the important value sets from an organizational standpoint, right from the deputies and I through our leadership team. And one of the concepts is that we want to model the behavior that we expect out of, to provide to our rank and file. So if I want, my homicide team, 911 communications team, or records team to be a high functioning team, we want them to grow in that space. And if myself, Mark, Nick, Anthony, Randy walk out of a room, we want to be a high functioning team and deconstruct some of the barriers that prevent us from actualizing the best internally. So I'm not sure if I confuse the situation or no, but some of the work we're doing is, yes, one-on-one. It's for specific people that, because Heather can probably go into this. Coaching is one piece, mentoring is another, being in positions where you can help direct people is another space. Different people need at different times the investment on all those different areas. And so the model actually allows for like a menu board of attached investments to be provided to people depending on where we, as an organization see their growth. Heather, maybe you can maybe top that off.
So the one-on-one coaching is one way to begin to help people be strategic in their thinking and reflect and so on. And so we've done that with a smaller group of people because it's not, you can't do 3,000 people that way. But we're also working on growing that group, because one of the threads that flows through this is that being more coach-like actually helps you in your leadership. If you're asking good questions, you're open and curious about feedback, if you're, really listening deeply as opposed to listening to tell, these are all characteristics that are powerful for leaders. So we want people to have the experience of coaching. We want them to use that coaching strategically. And then we're building bigger groups. So we've had some choose to do what we call dyad coaching, where two people coach each other, and I support that with feedback. We're moving to coaching circles. And our vision would be, yes, there'll be some one-on-one, and then we'll leverage those that have had one-on-one and pull them into larger groups. And gradually what our hope is that folks demonstrate the ability to be coach-like as one of the tools or part of the equipment for their own leadership. And so that's how we're looking to build it out as well. Does that help?
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. And just another, if you may allow me another question. Do we have in Peel Police, do our members, civilian and uniform, do like planning, like annual planning of their professional goals and for the year and maybe longer? And is this, if so, is this exercise kind of plugged into that process? That's my first question. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna let someone else in the organization. I think ideally we get performance reviews that are very coach-like, and I will let someone else talk about process there.
Sure. Maybe I know we have both Tamara Wilson here and Dirk. Maybe one of the two of you can explain that process and how it pertains to feedback, goal setting, and evaluation, et cetera.
Sure, I can take that, Chief, and through you, Chair. So under my umbrella is also the performance review mandate in partnership with Director Wilson. And what we plan on doing is embedding the leadership strategy, leadership opportunities and measurements all the way through both our lateral processes, our promotional processes, and our annual performance reviews. So if you noticed on the slide in 2022, that's when we're planning for force-wide integration and rollout. To the Chief's point earlier, we're taking a multi-dimensional approach to this. We're starting at the top with the SLT, and simultaneously we're also building it through the middle of the organization. And then when you enter, we're doing some beta testing with new recruits, our field training officers, all through this year. So we begin to give people the capacity to understand how leadership will benefit them in their journey and performance as they move forward through the organization. So it's all happening simultaneously, and our plan in 2022 is to begin to integrate it. Leadership is already one of the metrics on our performance annual reviews, but officers and civilians will now have the opportunity to do goal setting by participating in the leadership development program. I don't know if Director Wilson has anything else to add to that.
You've covered it. There's annual reviews, and as you pointed out, leadership is one of the core competencies that we focus on. And this program will just enhance that and be part of the development planning that we do every year.
Thank you. I think I can say on behalf of the board that we know that we have an amazing CMG and senior leadership team, and our annual report that was presented yesterday in the region is evidence of the progress and the outcomes of that leadership. And it's great to see that, your comments, Ms. Clayton, confirms that as well. I guess finally, my question is there a role for the board in this exercise to further support our senior leadership team in this process of leadership development?
Well, Chair, I guess that's the silence means that it's my turn to answer. I want to say that I think it's part of the big journey that, you have had with me about, we're about to roll into a presentation from Acting Inspector Tony Doherty. And, this is really, we appreciate, the comments about the CMG, but this is really about the rank and file. And that's where we're going to see this organization evolve into our aspirational state that we want this place to continue to build and to be the best nationally and internationally. And you'll see Tony's going to talk about who and the process and the investment into discerning who we hire and onboard, civilian and sworn. But from a recruiting standpoint, this journey is part of, I think, the board's overall mandate to make sure we're adequately and effectively, meeting the needs of this growing and diverse community. I'm going to say that our region, you as a board, have been entrusted to some of the most challenging environments policing can face in our current day. And so I think today, if it achieved an awareness that we are stewarding that role to invest in leadership is important. The second piece is when we come to, seeing people move laterally into positions, or if they choose to advance, that you have confidence that we're not just hoping that, we do an open call for promotions and people show up. We want them showing up at the doorstep willingly, but us having done our job to make sure that they're the most equipped. I think you can see what I'm inferring to is, should the board get to a point where, you select a chief or another senior leader, with 3,200 strong people here, there should be no reason in the future you need to ever go outside again. And this is our commitment to the board to make sure we not only give people the operational and technical skills and training, but we also build into this piece. So I guess your continued support and endorsement of this approach is what we dominantly need.
Thank you, Chief. You have our support. And okay, so with that, I'd like to move to receive the presentation. Can I have a mover? Mayor Crombie, and seconded by Chair Yanika. I think everybody wants a second, so I think everyone loves the report. So all in favor? Perfect. And so that has been carried. Our next presentation is about recruitment. I just want to say yesterday I had the pleasure, and I really wanted the whole board to attend, because that's tradition of, in our recruitment graduations, we all get to go. Unfortunately, it's COVID. But, again, our first class for 2021, an amazing 41 individuals with such rich stories, each one, their volunteer experience, their professional, their educational. It's the potential is so obvious. And so I'm excited for this presentation. So with that, I'd like to welcome Acting Inspector Tony Doherty to provide his presentation on a recruitment update.
And Tony, if you would indulge me just to preface your presentation, Tony is, and I think Acting Superintendent Tawfiq Saliba is here, who was working with Tony and his team, and now it's Superintendent Niles, have a remarkable set of individuals that are with them. And I think this is a good continuation to the previous conversation, because our vision of continuing to be a strong organization in an environment, and Chair Yanika and I chatted also recently, that we are in, from a population standpoint, in a growth jurisdiction. We're working with regional realty, and we hear from our constituents, the constituents through the regional counselors, that increased police presence, the need for a division in the north, intensification in Mississauga, require us to be thoughtful on resourcing and who and how we use them. But we're building people for a 30-year career, long after I joke that I'm on a tiki bar on a beach. We're going to have these people that Chair Attia saw yesterday get sworn in, policing our community, and perhaps some of them are deputies, chiefs, superintendents, a variety of different capacities. So I think it's important for us especially timely with a campaign that we're about to begin, is to capture, to unpack what it looks like to recruit and hire. It's a very challenging environment, which Tony will speak to, but to give also the board confidence that we're meeting the needs of our service, given our principles of innovation, modernizing our approach, but also serving this really complex, diverse community. So it's my pleasure to turn it over to Tony. I know we have our corporate operations for acting deputy is Bev Mullins there to help assist for any discussions. But Tony, over to you.
Thank you, Chief. Just going to share my screen. Is that showing up okay?
Perfect.
Thank you, Chief. So good morning, Chair and members of the board. I'm pleased this morning to provide you with a recruitment update that's going to showcase the great work accomplished by our recruitment staff in 2020. Our staff, just like many of us, had to adapt to the challenges created by the pandemic, and we did so through our adaptability, our innovation, and the use of technology. So just let me get through this here. There we go. All right, so as part of our, one of our strategies or our strategic planning, obviously, is our people to have an inclusive, engaged, and progressive workplace. The Recruitment and Staff Support Bureau, we directly support this strategy through our objective, which is to attract and retain professional and skilled employees that not only represent the community, but meets the needs of the organization as well as the community. And another important point is the fact that these new employees will become the future innovators and leaders of our organization. So the topics I'll review just kind of at a high level this morning will be our recruitment team, the recruitment process, which is our outreach team, as well as the selection process, 2020 hiring highlights, and what's new for 2021. So in this slide is just a graph of the two recruitment and staff support is comprised of two teams that work individually and collectively. The first is the uniform recruitment team, which is led by a staff sergeant. We have two sergeants. One is responsible for the recruitment selection process. The other sergeant is responsible for our outreach initiatives, as well as our cadet program. And we have 9 recruit investigators that process the applicant files. We have 2 outreach officers that engage our community members to attract people to apply to our organization, and we are supported by 3 administrative staff. On the civilian recruitment team, it's led by a civilian supervisor. There's 2 employment coordinators, they have 2 recruiters, and they have 1 administrative staff. The civilian recruitment team supports uniform recruitment through electronic file management and HR processing of files. So I'd like to speak about the highlights of, what makes Peel Regional Police different than some of the other agencies. So throughout my time in uniform recruiting, we've had great partnerships with other police services. We all do things uniquely and a little bit differently, some similar, some not. We have ongoing discussions about best practices. I can tell you that Peel Regional Police, we're continually striving to be progressive and innovative in our approach and to ensure that whatever changes we make to our recruitment process, it's always with a view of hiring the best candidates for Peel Regional Police. So I'm just going to take you through some of the things that we changed in 2020 or utilized to augment our recruitment process. As I had mentioned earlier, obviously the pandemic had a significant impact, in fact, on many of our core functions, which are usually in person. So from our outreach activities, it's our outreach officers attending community events, career fairs, going to post-secondary institutions to provide presentations. All those things got suspended because of COVID. With respect to our recruitment functions, again, a lot of the things that we do are in person. We do in-person assessments of our applicants, in-person testing, which would either be written testing or fitness testing, and as well in-person interviews. Again, all those things had to be suspended because of COVID. So we had to pivot from our traditional approach and rely on technology to perform these activities without interruption and being able to meet our hiring goals and needs. Some of the things that we explored and implemented were establishing a social media presence on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We utilized these platforms so that we could share information with our community members. We could post information and share stories about new people that we had hired and what was it that drew them to policing and what path did they take to become successful as a police officer. Right now, we're currently sitting at about 2,500 followers for Instagram, and that's just us having opened the account last September. So we're doing really, really well and having very positive engagement with our community. Other things that we had to do is we utilized digital platforms such as Microsoft Teams, WebEx, Zoom, and Google Meet to facilitate conducting information sessions. These are important for us. It's an important outreach function where members of the community get an opportunity to engage with our outreach officers to discuss different aspects of the selection process, what's involved, and what they can do to make themselves competitive in that process. And it gives the members of the community an opportunity to engage with an officer, ask questions, and have some rapport building. The other important thing that we needed these digital platforms for was to continue with our recruitment process to be able to conduct in-depth interviews with our applicants. These are a critical part of our selection process. This is an opportunity for the recruiter to really get to know who that applicant is and understand their character, their background, their qualifications, and assess their suitability. A real interesting initiative that we implemented last year that's been very, very successful for us was the implementation of a female inclusion team, also known as our FIT team. And the purpose of this team was to attract and retain female applicants through a mentorship program. There are not as many female applicants as there are male applicants. There's a high level of competition between other police services for female applicants. The implementation of this team allowed us to make meaningful connections with female applicants and to provide mentorship throughout the entire recruitment process by offering them support and guidance. A good example of this is that some female applicants have difficulty successfully performing the PrEP test, which is our physical fitness test. So we implemented actual physical fitness training sessions for our female applicants where they would work together as a team to improve upon their fitness and ultimately improve upon their performance on the PrEP test. And it's been very, very successful for us. What makes us different or unique from other police agencies? The one thing I can say about my recruiters, which I'm very, very impressed with, is the fact that they really take pride in getting to know their applicants. It's a very people-focused connection, and it starts from day one, from the first interaction, and it continues throughout the application process with ongoing guidance, support, and encouragement. And the one thing that I've heard time and time again, and I know that Acting Superintendent Saliba can echo this, is that the most significant feedback we get from our applicants is how impressed they are with our approach versus other police services. The interpersonal connections our recruiters make with applicants makes them feel engaged, valued, supported, and encouraged to continue on in the process. Lastly, we only hire the best. We have a highly competitive selection process that results in us only hiring the best applicants from our community who will be our future innovators, our future leaders. We pay particular emphasis on language skills, education, work experience, lived experience, fitness, volunteerism. All these things are factored in assessing someone's suitability. I'll just give you an overview here of our selection process. So it starts for an individual as an online application and the completion of certain documentation and providing supporting documentation in the forms of certificates. There's a pre-assessment stage where we review the application form to do a preliminary assessment on suitability or competitiveness. The applicant moves on to testing stages, which involves the prep fitness test, followed up with an in-depth interview with one of our recruiters. And if things are good with that applicant and they have the suitability and the competitiveness, they go on to a psychological assessment, which is a very stringent assessment process involving testing and an in-person interview with a psychologist. It's our the Peel Regional Police psychological assessment is one of the most stringent in the province. And when an applicant is deemed suitable in that area, they will then proceed on to background checks, which are the standard security checks, financial checks, to make sure that everything's in order and that there are no concerns lurking. And then there's a recommendation by our recruiter for the individual to proceed to a hiring board. And the hiring board is a panel with an inspector, staff sergeant, and a sergeant, who basically ensure that the recruiters have done their job well. But it's also an opportunity for us to get to meet in person the applicant, the candidate, for us to make our own assessment on the qualifications that they bring to the table, their suitability, and what is their passion for policing? What is it that they hope to get from policing, and what is it that they hope to give to policing? And we want people who can really, truly have that human-focused approach. And then the final stage is just a medical assessment that just ensures that obviously our candidate is healthy. And from that point, they go on to receive an official offer of employment letter. So this information I'm going to speak to now is just some of the uniform hiring highlights from 2020. So some of this information is contained in the 2020 Equal Opportunity Report, which you've already received, but I'm just going to touch on some of the things that I'm very proud of this past year with our staff. So you'll see in this slide, there was 3,516 applications last year. That was an 82.9% increase from 2019. A real significant increase. And what we noticed there is that there was positive growth in our racialized as well as our female applicants, as you can see. The new uniform hires last year, the total number was 162. This was a 31.7% increase from the previous year. So this was an unprecedented hire year, even during COVID circumstances and the limitations that imposed upon us. As you'll see by the chart, there was positive growth in all areas of underrepresented groups, racialized persons, female hires, as well as Indigenous hires. I also want to highlight the civilian new hires for 2020. There was a slight reduction in applications for civilian hires. They had a reduction in 21.4%. However, of the applications that were received, there's still positive growth in receiving applications from racialized persons and female applicants. One of the reasons for the reduced number of applications is there just wasn't that many positions that we were posting for last year. The pandemic had an impact on that, as well as we had to suspend certain things such as our YIPI program, which is high school co-op students coming in and participating in job opportunities with us. We couldn't do that due to the pandemic. So variables like that impacted on our numbers. You'll see that the number of hires then obviously went down. It was less, minus 20%, and that impacted on the number of racialized persons and female persons just by a small margin. All right, so now I'd like to move on to something new and exciting that was a year or more in the works. And I'd like to introduce to you our new Faces of Peel advertising campaign. So this past year, Uniform Recruiting collaborated with corporate communications to create a new advertising campaign to engage and attract members of our community to become police constables and cadets. So here's just one example of 6 posters that we've created. And the campaign uses inspirational action words to encourage prospective applicants to bring their story to be part of the change at Peel Regional Police. The faces that you see on the board represent the diversity in our organization and our community. The faces can be interchangeable from one poster to the next. And our ultimate goal is to attract community members that will join us as police constables and cadets. This campaign, which I'm going to show you a little bit more of shortly in the next few slides, is set to be released in July, and it's going to be done exclusively at the outset on social media, hitting Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So here's all those posters put together in one slide, and you'll see the action words that we're trying to engage our audience members with: inspire, lead, inclusive, engage, innovate, achieve. Now, not all these words may connect with every individual, but we're hoping that at least one of these words or more will connect to that individual. And as they look at this poster and they read that word and start making those mental connections themselves and saying, hey, you know, how can I be a leader at Peel Regional Police? What can I do? What have I done in my past? What's my story that I can bring and be part of that change? That's the concept behind the campaign. So now I'm just going to show you that this is not only just a poster campaign, but we can also move it into a live video campaign.
I bring my story to be the change.
You can too.
Join us.
I bring my story to be the change. You can too. Join us. Inspire.
Elevate.
Lead. Innovate.
Engage. I bring my story to be the change.
You can too. Join us.
Swipe up to be the change.
And that is my presentation for the board. Chief, back to you.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you. I appreciate the presentation. Thank you for unpacking what the process looks like and as well as our future campaign. So with that, Chair Atia, I'll turn it back to you for any questions or discussion.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Tony, for that. Any comments from the board or questions? Mr. Chada.
Thank you, Mr. Doherty, for the presentation. Just a question about the selection, the process, how it goes to the application, then the pre-assessment, then the fitness test, and then in-depth interview, psychological assessment, and then the background checks. It not be prudent if the background checks come somewhere close to or before in-depth interview?
Yes, sir. I've just done a very high-level review of that. There are preliminary checks that the recruiter will do before that in-person interview is conducted. They will do the standard CPIC checks, driver's license checks on the individual to ensure there is nothing of concern, obviously, before proceeding with that in-depth interview. The background checks on the back end are more intelligence-based checks, as well as family member reference checks, that sort of thing, work references. But yes, that does happen at that stage. You're correct.
And about the, if you can please tell us more about the psychological assessments. Who does it? Someone internal or any professional doctors outside? And what's the process? Do we pick as a police agency or?
Yeah, we put out a request for tender probably about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, and we ended up selecting 2 psychological providers to conduct our psychological assessments. We have 2 separate companies that conduct those assessments. And the psychological assessment involves a battery test. There's 4 in total. I won't get into the specifics about what they are, but generally speaking, they're looking for any kind of psychological disorder. They conduct personality assessments. So we're looking for attributes in the individual that would make them a good police officer candidate. We also assess their resiliency and their stress tolerance. How do they handle stressful situations, and you know, are they going to be able to adapt in that capacity? So what happens in the psychological assessment stage is that the Individual will attend the psychological provider. They will complete the written tests, which are kind of what we call bubble tests, which is basically they make their selection on it. The psychologist will review that test and get an interpretation of the findings, and then they will follow up with an in-person assessment where they will explore or probe certain areas of concern to make a determination on that individual's suitability to proceed. And so individuals can be unsuitable, which means that they won't proceed in the process. They can be suitable, and they may be suitable with some concerns, and we'll look at those concerns individually and just determine what the significance is, if any, of those concerns. Every person is unique and everyone's different. What might be a concern for one individual isn't necessarily a concern for another individual, so we'll just do an independent assessment of that before proceeding.
Thank you. Sorry, Lynn, just last one. Just quickly too, before the medical assessment, there's a hiring board. Who makes that hiring board, and like what's the composition of it, and the number of individuals, or who actually they are? And just not to be too like exact, but what is the normal time frame for a good fit police officer from the starting from the first to the last, from the beginning of the application to the medical assessment? What is the timeline, please? And thank you.
So the hiring board for uniform hires consists of the inspector from recruitment and staff support, the staff sergeant from recruitment and staff support, and one of the sergeants. So it's three members involved in the panel. And those interviews usually take 30 minutes to complete. Your second question was, how much time does it take to process an applicant from start to finish? It varies, generally speaking, between 3 to 6 months for individuals. Sometimes it's a longer process. As we mentioned, there's 3,500 applications that we need to process and make a determination on, but the average is generally 3 to 6 months.
Thank you all. Thank you for all the wonderful information. I saw the pictures of the yesterday's sworn-in ceremony. I hope in the future, when things are better, we can all attend in person for those ones and meet and greet their families. Who knows, yesterday maybe we sworn in one of the future Mr. Dariappa or Mr. Andrews or Milanovic or Odoadi or individuals like yourself. Best wishes.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Ron. Anyone else? Mr. Howell.
Thank you, Chair. Excellent questions, Vice Chair Chadha. Further to those same subjects, I think our biggest concern here is post-traumatic stress syndrome and trying to get it out before we get too far into hiring. In regards to that as well, in the hiring and the training, for the final evaluation, can you just explain the differential applied to any candidate? For instance, I would assume as far as physical standards, is there anything difference between male and female? And any other standardization for different criteria for any type of candidates?
Sure. The criteria for all candidates is standardized and the same with respect to the PrEP fitness test, which is a physical readiness evaluation for police officers. That's a two-part test that involves a obstacle course followed up by a shuttle run. The applicants must meet the standard in order to proceed in our selection process. The standard for the obstacle course is that they must complete it within 2 minutes and 37 seconds. So 2:38 and above, you're not successful. With respect to the shuttle run, which is basically a measurement of someone's cardiovascular ability or VO2 max, they must meet a minimum level of 7 on that to proceed. So you need to have a pass in both of those in order to proceed in the process. Is there an opportunity to come back and be retested? Yes, we'll work with people, especially people that we see potential in, and give them the opportunity to train and then come back and be reassessed on those tests. But you must pass both components of the test to move on in the process. It's a bona fide occupational requirement that you do pass and meet the standard on both of those.
So basically, the standards for physical requirements are the same for male and female? Hello?
I think Tony's frozen.
Can we, Tawfik, maybe you can, while Tony's refreshing, can assist?
Yes, there are different standards for the female and male that are listed, and they're provided that information ahead of time. And as Tony had mentioned, they will do the test, and if there's any room for improvement, then our recruiters will work with them to mentor them through to meet those standards.
So there are different standards. Thank you. Are there any different standards applied to any other type of applicants other than based on sex?
They're strictly gender-based.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. I believe Mayor Crombie. Go ahead.
Thanks very much. So what were the targets for hiring for 2020?
I can answer that if you'd like through the chair.
Yes, thank you.
As Tony mentioned, we hired 162 last year. We target each year ahead of time based on, of course, what our authorized complement is and what we anticipate we need in terms of attrition through retirements. But each class is set ahead of the year, also based on budget as well. And I think Dirk can provide the numbers for 2021 as they're set so far.
Sure.
Certainly, through the chair, our 2021 numbers are differing. Our first two classes, Mayor, were 40 each. Our next class we're hiring shortly is 20, and we'll close the year at the end of the year in December with 20. Just to clarify, I'm not sure if there were some technical difficulties, but Mr. Howell, I believe you asked if there was physical differences between men and women for the testing.
He just wondered, he asked if there were different standards applied.
Right, and
Mr. Howell, you are mute.
I'm sorry, physical, the standards for physical testing. I pretty well know the difference otherwise.
Yeah, so just to clarify, there are no differences to what Acting Inspector Doherty was saying. All candidates, whether male or female, must get 237 on the obstacle course and reach a level 7 on the shuttle run.
Okay, so I've got two different answers now.
Yeah, I think there was some confusion with the technical piece.
My apologies, Mr. Howell. I'm just thinking of the pin test. Superintendent Niles is correct. My apologies for that confusion on my part.
Okay, thanks very much.
I think the floor is still mine. So 161 is what I heard for 2020.
Yes, that's correct, Mayor.
Thank you very much. And I will share with you that a dear friend of mine's son was one of the graduates yesterday. His name was Elijah Mendez, badge 4646. And he's going to start at 22 Division Monday morning. And boy, is he excited. Oh, Sunday morning. First shift is on Sunday, rather. And I just want you all to know that he was very inspired by all the officers at 11 Division because my friend who I served with for a period of time on the Police Community Liaison Committee, and he used to bring Elijah in with him. So, and I think he had the opportunity to meet the chief at some point, and he was so inspired. So I'm very proud of him and just want to say hello to Elijah and wish you well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other comments from the board? I just want to share a story that I shared to the graduates yesterday, if you allow me. Back when there was a wave of Syrian refugees who came to Canada, I believe 2015, my mother was involved in, collecting used items to share with families who needed them. And she asked me to go deliver something to a family. And I met this family who had just arrived and had escaped the war. The family had this young boy. He was 11 years old at the time, didn't speak English at all. And the father reached out to me last week Now his son is 17, finished high school, speaks English. And the father reached out to me because his son wants to join the police service, and was inspired by experiences he had and the difference that he saw in police here versus other places, and sought my advice on how to go down that journey. And so I think that was very, for me, that was very touching. It confirms that the experiences that residents have in Peel with our police service are experiences of compassion and touch people's lives, and to the point where people, young youth who've come to Canada, become Canadians, want to be part of our police service. So that's something that's made me certainly very proud of. So just a story to share. With that, if there are no more comments, I want to call to receive the presentation. Would someone like to move? Mr. Chada, seconder. Councilor Medeiros, all in favor? Thank you very much for the presentation. Okay. Our next item is the 2021 VCOM Group Annual Report. Chief, would you like to speak to this report?
Absolutely, and I believe Deputy O'Doherty is prepared to introduce or comment on that.
Thank you, Chief, and through the chair. The report outlines our long-standing history in VCOM, particularly with Peel Police taking the lead in organizing the interoperability of partners within the region, including the cities of Brampton, Mississauga, Caledon, and other critical infrastructure partners who have joined together to ensure the criticality, reliability, and resiliency of our radio system. And most recently, what we are garnering significant attention for, not only across Canada, but as of a couple months ago, internationally and across the US certainly, is our public broadband safety network and the implementation and operationalization of that within VCOM. So as you know, Peel is looked to as the coordinator. We are funded collaboratively by all the different agencies, and I'm proud to report that the report outlines that the program continues to be successful, serves the citizens and organizations of Peel proudly, and we maintain one of the safest and interoperable radio networks in the country.
Thank you for that. Are there any comments from the board on this report? Okay, seeing none. Can I have a mover to receive the report? Mr. Bowden, a seconder. Mr. Howell, all in favor? Thank you very much. That's been carried. The next item is the 2020 Persons at Risk Annual Report. Chief, please, if you may.
Thank you, and I'll be turning it over to Deputy Milinovich. This report is, as not to take his comments, is an annual report that we bring to the board. I just want to attach this to one of our strategic priorities as it pertains to what we call or have branded priority populations. And it is a self-constructed branding that's kind of followed me in terms of my vision for how we speak to the variety of different vulnerable communities or people at risk and in need. So with that, I think Nick has some thoughts on this report and its future in terms of how it's going to look.
Thank you, Chief, and through the chair. Yeah, when we look at even just the title and the way that this report is organized, we really believe that there's an opportunity to more closely align it with our strategic vision moving forward, and that being a report that would focus on our priority populations. As the Chief mentioned, it's can seem like a bit of an ambiguous term, priority populations, but I think this is a really good representation of what that can mean. So contained in this report, we have statistics on child abuse and neglect, elder and vulnerable adults, youth crime, internet child exploitation, and intimate partner violence. And all of those groups represent segments within our community that, because of circumstances or their experiences, need to absolutely become a priority for our service. We need to do everything we can to wrap, our service arms around them along with our community and insulate them from some of the things that we see occurring in our community and we know are occurring. So that's really the vision moving forward. We've seen a pretty good demonstration of that through our intimate partner violence work. Again, this report is meant to reflect some of the statistics in 2020. So I think what I'll do is I'll very quickly walk through those categories that this report denotes and highlight a few statistical trends for interest and maybe a couple of programming and service enhancements that we've done. And at some point, Deputy Andrews, please feel free to jump in as well, because the elder, vulnerable adult piece and the youth crime piece is something that his area is heavily involved with as well. So in the area of child abuse and neglect, again, very quickly, overall, it's handled by our Special Victims Unit. This is a group of investigators that are specially trained and mandate to investigate these types of offenses. And we have seen, like is going to be a common theme in this report, a decrease in number of offenses and reported incidents, and fairly substantial. What we equate that to generally, again, are some of the restrictions and effects of COVID on our community. A reduction in or closure of certain daycares, schools, fewer reports coming through our educational partners and social services, those types of things, but we have seen a reduction in that space. And then if we continue on into our elder and vulnerable abuse portion of the report, this is really where we see the only deviation. I'm going to be talking about slight downticks in our statistical trends, but generally speaking, there has been a slight uptick here. And I believe the report, and again, I'd invite Deputy Andrews to jump in if I'm misspeaking, but I believe it attaches that to the growth in that demographic of our community, along with some of the preventative and awareness messaging that his team's engaged in. I'll just assume Mark's good with that unless he cuts me off.
I'd like to just jump in there very quickly, Nick. Thank you for that. Through the chair, yes, the increase in the number of occurrences at 13% is significant, but we believe this is a positive thing. Firstly, because of the changing demographic in our community, which is aging, which we see a significant increase in the aging population in our community, but also because it indicates that our messaging and our engagement in the community is taking hold. And what may have been missed in the past is now being captured. But also it points to some significant changes in our process internally. We've built out more robust reporting and data analysis processes that are properly capturing what's actually taking place. So that increase, while it is noticeable, is in our belief a positive. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Mark. And then continuing on into the report, we get into some discussion on family intimate partner violence. Obviously, I've had the opportunity to speak about this with members of the board and internally and externally as well. But we have seen a slight decrease in those numbers. It's ever so slight, which doesn't coincide with what some of our service providers are seeing and hearing. And the obvious question becomes, well, why is that? Again, we have the effects of a global pandemic, more isolation, less opportunity to report. But as a service, we also understand that it would be naive of us to think that some of the geopolitical things that have occurred aren't affecting our more diverse communities and their willingness to come forward and report to us. So, the establishment of the Intimate Partner Violence Unit, which occurred at the end of April, so April 20th, I believe, till May 20th was our first month, we've started to pull some of the analytics of that. And, the ultimate objective of it is to really provide a more culturally appropriate response to this area that we know is carrying deep impact for our communities. One of the ways that we look to do that is by reducing the involvement of uniformed personnel in those investigations, thereby making it more comfortable for communities who may not be as comfortable reporting and seeking help to report to police. But in addition to that, we've also engaged more heavily with some of our service providers, and through Safe Center of Peel have initiated a referral process where offenses that are reported or that we become aware of that aren't yet criminal in nature can be referred to social services with expertise in those areas to hopefully avoid the escalation of violence and some of the things that we've seen in years past. And then just moving into the youth crime piece, again, we're seeing a general reduction. In fact, of the areas that you have the statistical analysis, I believe the only slight uptick was in, and an ever so slight uptick was property crime, but otherwise there was a general decline from 2019 to 2020. And again, I'll offer Mark an opportunity to explain it a lot more articulately than I can.
Nick, I think you've captured the essence of the report pretty accurately. The significant drop in cases in charges, there was a prior to in 2018 and 2019, we saw the trend declining in the number of charges, and there were multiple reasons for that. But the precipitous drop last year can all be traced back to the lockdown and COVID protocols.
Great, thank you, Mark. And then finally, moving on and into our Internet Child Exploitation Unit. This is an incredible unit that really protects some of our most vulnerable. And the way that they do that is by identifying people who would really are looking to prey on children is probably the easiest way to put it. But they continue to see an increase in cases coming in, which places some added pressure on the team. It's composed of 1 detective, 6 detective constables. In 2020 or towards the end of 2020, they've done a couple of things to begin to address the increased volume, which we attribute, one part to technological advancement, people's ability to store larger files on computers, but also, of course, a heavier reliance on the online environment for connections, those types of things. But in response to that, they continue to work with software that helps them categorize different images and identifying them as being illegal as per the criminal code, i.e. child pornography by definition, so that it's not an officer sitting on a computer going image by image. We also continue to work with our justice partners and push for the ability to take large files, because there's a correlation sometimes between the number of images and volume of images and perceived seriousness of offense, which requires them to walk through these huge files and individually categorize them in order to support things like sentencing, those types of things, like to provide perspective on how serious the offense is. It's not always necessary, so they continue to work with our justice partners and Crowns to advocate for a reduced reliance on the need to equate number of images with seriousness. And with that, I'll pass it back to the chair and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Before taking questions from the board, I just want to point everyone's attention to something new in the report, and not just this one, but other reports and going forward. Each section of our reports, I should say first, as part of the strategic planning process and with the governance committee of the board, we've asked the police, the chief and his team to tie the reports and directly to our strategic plan on the specific goal and priority. So you'll now see that in each section here, there is a sub section on the strategic plan alignment. And this will help us to continue to ensure that everything we're doing ties back to our priorities and will measure towards our successful achievement of our goals. So that's just something I wanted to flag. With that, are there any comments or questions from the board? Mayor Crombie.
Thank you. And thank you for all the information, Deputy. It's very worthwhile for all of us to have. Good to see, some decreases in the numbers too. Unfortunately, increases in some areas where we'd hoped not to see them. My question is, you had started to discuss this, and I think I've mentioned this before in our conversations. I'm a little worried that in some key areas like domestic violence and child abuse, etc., we're seeing a decrease during a year where, during the year of the pandemic, when I think we know anecdotally at least, and you've heard from the organizations that provide supports that that may not be the case. So what are some of the other reasons that this may be unreported in the pandemic year, or are there other reasons? Do you think reporting is down because, to be honest, we're all told to stay home and there isn't many different places to go and the shelters were full? I don't know. I mean, I'm glad some of the key indicators are down, but I'm wondering if they truly are.
Again, thank you for that question, Your Worship. It's a terrific question. And anecdotally, I believe that it's really a constellation of a number of things that are affecting that. Of course, you have people's ability to report. They're being forced to isolate with people who are exercising coercion and control over them. It's an incredibly difficult position for a person to be in. That plus you have certain communities that are not as trusting of police, and some for very good reasons. So there's that reluctance as well. People, the idea of walking into a police station for certain members of our community, that's scary. And it's one of the reasons why we're so happy that we've transitioned out of a police station to a family justice center model. And I've said this before, one of the largest services nationally to have successfully done that. So we're very proud of that. That's why there's the emphasis on let's rely less on uniform response so that we can begin to break down some of those barriers. And then a huge piece of it is the preventative benefits that's carried by awareness. Like when we look at some of the cases that we've seen, intimate partner violence that result in the absolute worst way, we don't always have contact with them. And so we have to ask, well, why is that? It's very seldom that, a person goes from no violence and escalates all the way to the most violent crime. And, again, it becomes about engaging other people. Awareness is a huge piece of prevention. Last year, November 2020, we did the awareness campaign, It's Not Okay. We saw a 60% increase in flow to our traffic to our website on our external page. When we launched the Intimate Partner Violence Unit, our reach was well over 14 million. And that was not about a pat on the back. That was about making sure that our community knew that we had changed the way that we're doing things. And, if they found or made the decision that they wanted to come forward, it could and would be a more comfortable experience. And very briefly, I threw out the teaser that we're starting the analytics and identification of the key performance indicators, because of course, we always want to make sure services, when we make those changes, more effective and more efficient. In terms of the effectiveness and efficiency of this program, we're running anywhere between, we've had a couple of different analyses done, but 85% to up to 98% of cases that fall within the intimate partner violence being taken over by our teams. In addition to that, that represents a little over, as the chief said yesterday at council, a little over 2,400 hours that are no longer sitting with our uniformed personnel, can be redirected more appropriately elsewhere. And of course, we're able to better manage those investigations. And then the last thing I would leave you with, because we recognize that, we will never get everybody to report to police. So then it becomes our position, we need to push and support other organizations in their quest to have people connect with them so they can get help for survivors. Safe Center of Appeal has been an amazing partner. They, like a lot of other service agencies, are struggling with resourcing. So, our spot then becomes to help support them in advocacy for funding, and look for new opportunities for them. But in the first month alone, we had more referrals go to Safe Center of Peel than they'd had in the previous year. So like, again, another opportunity there for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other board members? Okay, well, this is a very thorough report. Thank you, Deputy Chief. Certainly, important priority areas that we need to continue to work hard on. Okay, with that, can I have a mover to receive the report? Mayor Crombie and a seconder, Mr. Chada, all in favor? Thank you very much. It's been carried. The next item of the agenda is the 2020 Equal Opportunity Report. Chief, would you like to begin with this report?
Sure, thank you, Chair Tia. And although, I think we still have Acting Inspector Tony Doherty, he's online there with the Superintendent Niles. He's spoken to some of the key accomplishments in there, but I'm just gonna hand it over to Corporate Services Commander Bev Mullins to just address it, and then if Tony has any top-ups. It is a good report, and it's got a lot of data in it, and to let it pass without acknowledging, particularly the narrative in the community about, what does PRP look like and what does our 3200 look and feel like. We are unlike any other, municipality in Canada, and it's worth highlighting some of the efforts done to not only onboard but retain them. And we have some ideas for this calendar year, which we know at next year's annual report will also strengthen our capacity. So Bev, over to you, or Tony.
Good afternoon, everyone. As you've seen earlier in Tony's presentation, recruiting has done a fabulous job in trying to reach out to all our community members and stroke interest and bring along the best that we've seen. And as noted in the report before you, we've made a real effort and have seen success in increasing our key components, such as our racialized applicants. They've increased, as Tony said earlier, to 69%. That's a 3.7% increase. And our females to 22%, or 3.3%. When we look at the actual hiring that happened on the uniform side, of the uniform members that we hired last year, 56% were racialized, 43% were female, and 2.5% was Indigenous. Amazing. When we look at the civilian hires, 60% were racialized, 61% were female, and 3% were Indigenous, and 1.5% was persons with disabilities. So amazing work that the Recruiting Bureau has done in the last year. As Tony presented earlier, a lot of outreach, adjusting to the environment with with COVID, still managing to get out, reach out to people, have that human contact, and then looking forward to say, well, how can we be even more innovative and reach all our community members through things like the Faces of Peel program that's going to be implemented in the next month. Tony, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Thank you. No, I just wanted to add that this report really does showcase our efforts throughout a calendar year and the successes that we've been able to accomplish. And it's not any one individual or one area, it's definitely a collaborative effort. Even in the authoring of this report, it was uniform recruiting, civilian recruiting, it was equity and inclusion, diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as HR. It really does, this report reflects on what we've done in our area, but it impacts on the organization as a whole. And I just want to acknowledge the work that's been done by everyone to contribute to this. And thank you, Bev, for outlining some of those highlights. Again, that's all I have to comment on. Thanks.
Thanks, Bev and Tony. And I think what we'll see is next year's report, given the work that Director Tamara Wilson is undertaking and some of the other work on a healthy, respectful workplace, the EDI plan, a culture shift, just strengthening, how we look after people for 30 years is also part of this report, because, they're an investment, and we do see them that way. So thank you for that, Chair Atiya.
Thank you for the report. Any comments or questions from the board on this? Okay, seeing none, can I have a mover to receive the report? Mr. Bowden, seconded by Mayor Crombie. All in favor? That has been carried. Thank you. We now have an update status report on body-worn cameras. Deputy Chief Edwardi, please proceed with your update.
Thank you, Chair, and to the board. You will obviously see, if compared to last month's report, not a ton of change in regards to update. However, this is a positive sign as the project continues to move forward fairly quickly. Training now is the largest component. We have trained over and pretty close to 1,000 officers to date. Training will probably be completed in the next few weeks. The schedule for full deployment is still on track for end of summer, beginning of fall. Given that vacation season is upon us, there may be sporadic delays in the deployment of cameras just because of time off for officers and civilian employees. We have recently completed the internal composition of our redaction unit. This is the unit that will review video footage from the Axon camera when required, redact and ensure privacy measures as set forth by recommendations of our community and policy are completed. They are just completed their first week of 2 weeks of training, and they will be fully operational by the beginning of July. And so we remain on time, within scope, and on schedule, pending any questions.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the board? Okay, seeing none, can I have a mover to receive this report? Chair Yanenka, seconded by Ron Chadha, and all in favor? Thank you. This report has been carried. Our final item of the agenda is, if you may indulge me, I'd like to take this opportunity to reflect on the recent attack in London, Ontario. I mean, there are a number of issues that continue both within our region and nationally that impact policing, impact adequate policing of our residents. And after the attack in London, Ontario, I was approached by the chair of the London Police Board and asked to co-author a piece in the Globe and Mail that reflects his views and my personal views on the larger issue that kind of stems out of that unfortunate incident. As all of you know, we were all shocked to see the mass murder on the street of London, Ontario that killed 4 members of the Afzaal family and left their 9-year-old son orphaned. And all of this kind of connects into the issue of hate-motivated crimes. And this is not new to us as a board or a police service. Police services across the country have been grappling with these issues for some time. This family essentially went out for an evening stroll and was killed because of their faith. And as hard as it is to hear from many Canadians, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, crimes against racialized communities are happening in our country, and hate-motivated crime statistics in Peel prove it. We've seen it. The report was presented to us in our last board meeting. And what we're seeing in Peel and probably in other parts of the country is that, while there's a steady rise in hate-motivated crimes, we're also seeing a decline in the number of criminal charges laid. Threats of go back home where you came from, or assaults where someone pulls off someone's hijab or other, religious or traditional faith garments, have minimal penalty or none at all. A lot of this kind of interconnects into cyber hate, where there are, what's concerning is the scope and breadth of such online media due to the, level of ease that many young people can access such inflammatory, unfiltered, and unvalidated information. One must ask how a 20-year-old young man in London, Ontario, reached a point in his life to take such a horrific action inspired by hate. And so online, these echo chambers online are, where extremist perspectives are shared and echoed is very problematic. And sentiments of ignorance, bias, and hate are amplified in these groupthink phenomenons online. Another big part of this is justice. Besides now political action that's needed to address hate-motivated crimes, there is a big part as it relates to our justice system. Even though our police service and those across the country take hate crimes very seriously, the challenge is that our justice system currently has an incredibly high threshold for anyone to be prosecuted under hate-related laws. And this outdated model emboldens hateful behavior, as it does little to dissuade perpetrators, and in turn it normalizes hate-filled rhetoric and actions. So for instance, eliminating concurrent sentences for domestic terrorist attacks is a starting point. If you all recall, in Quebec City in 2017, Alexandre Bissonnette, the 27-year-old man who killed 6 people, is only serving time for 1 murder. It's known as a 6-for-1 deal. If convicted, the London individual, 20-year-old Nathaniel Veltman, has killed 4 people, and will, if convicted, will be sentenced for the life of 1 individual. So our laws must reflect our society's values and priorities. And if hate crimes are difficult to prosecute and carry minimal conviction, it sends the wrong message to perpetrators and victims. And finally, and the last thing that I reflected on is op-ed is the aspect of reporting. Tougher punishments, tougher policing is not the only solution. We need to remove barriers to reporting hate. Up to 2/3 of all victims are not coming forward when they experience hate-motivated crimes or incidents, according to Statistics Canada General Society survey. Our police service needs to continue to work with our communities to increase reporting of hate crimes so that we can both identify and engage perpetrators and provide victims with a sense of safety and support. Some police services are looking at third-party reporting mechanisms or options, or online reporting portals to make it easier for victims. So finally, in conclusion, as it relates to Peel Police, we need to ensure that no resident of Peel is afraid of being murdered while visiting their house of worship, that mothers and sisters can go out wearing their hijab or any other traditional or faith clothing without fear or worry about being attacked with verbal and physical aggression. We must ensure that every Canadian family feels safe to go out for a walk on a warm Sunday evening without being terrorized. When our children ask us if they should be afraid, we must be able to tell them with confidence to live without fear and be proud to be themselves. And so I want to thank everyone here in the public for indulging me, and I welcome other members on the board or our chief management group, our deputies and chief, to share their thoughts on this challenge that is before us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if Mr. Boughton.
Sorry, Mr. Bowden and then Mayor Crombie. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Tia. For the good of the board, the chair and Rob Serpe and I have had some discussions on this over the last, since the incident in London. And I think you've hit the nail on the head on the problems that we have in the justice system, where, I call it in for a penny, in for a pound, so that somebody can kill 4 people and be convicted of 4 first-degree murder charges, and the sentence they get is equal to somebody who just goes out and kills 1 person because of the concurrent and consecutive. I understand, Chair Atia, your thoughts and what you have put through so clearly today on the hate crimes, but I think it has to go further than that. We need to look at the some of the violence that's happening in our society, particularly with gang-related incidents, where the birthday party of last weekend, where somebody goes in there with a handgun. There's an attendee at the party who has a handgun, and then a gangbanger goes in there and they have a shoot up, and other innocent people get wounded as a result of it. We know that within the gangs, and I'll let and Chief, I would, and through you, Mr. Chair, Chief, I would ask that you respond on this as well, because I have also discussed this with the chief, where there are gangbangers who are out on bail who know that they can go and commit additional offenses, and it doesn't matter if they get caught, because when they're run concurrently, and if they're going to get convicted of a first degree or second degree or whatever number of assaults they're involved in, or carrying handguns, it doesn't make any difference if you're charged 1 time, 3 times, 10 times. You get convicted of them all, everything runs concurrently. And as a result, there's no consequences for additional bad behavior, whether it be firing a gun or a hate motivated crime. So Chair, as I said, what you brought forward is excellent. I don't think that we should limit what we as a board believe is the right thing to do in the justice system just on hate crimes, but for crimes that involve multiple homicides or assaults, in order that the chief of PRP and all the police forces can then effectively deal with these people who are repeat offenders with multiple charges and multiple convictions with very little consequences for their actions. And I think as a board, we need to step up now and get some focus on this in the public agenda, so that people will understand. I believe this could be a major point that will be discussed for the next elections that are coming up, both provincial and federal, which will be up soon. We need to make a change in the justice system. Where it is now is totally unacceptable.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you. Chief, before you comment, if we can just go to Mayor Crombie.
Sure, thank you. And to Al, thank you for your comments. And congratulations to you, Ahmed, and your colleague, Javid Sakara, for authoring that a letter to the editor, that editorial in the Globe and Mail, that you really elevated our board, and I thank you for that. You know, I am the mayor of a very diverse city, and I always felt it makes us stronger that we are welcoming, inclusive, and vibrant. However, we are also not exempt of hate crimes, and it gives me great shame, frankly, that these incidents occur. You know, I recall a young man who was Muslim, and he was with his family coming home from a parking lot at Mississauga Valleys, and was beaten by some soccer thugs whose team lost and had probably imbibed too much. And I still run into him in the community, and he's still recovering. And I just don't have the words for people who have so much hatred in their hearts. And so, Al, whereas I agree with you that these sentencing issues are a problem, I think these are different things. I think that guns and gang violence, it doesn't come from a place of hate. It comes from profiteering and criminal activity. Hate crimes are different. They're they're based on racial discrimination and prejudice. What we saw in London was an act of terrorism, let's be honest. And it caused me to get many calls, texts, emails about people feeling unsafe in their homes, unsafe to walk on our streets. With this chief, we had a summit with the Muslim Council of Peel and other support organizations and all the imams on how to address that. We've seen incidents of anti-Semitism too, anti-Asian hate. So I think that, and recently, unfortunately, there are too many incidents, the burning of the pride flag against the GBL2QS plus community. This breaks my heart when I see kids burning a pride flag to intimidate one of their colleagues at a high school. you know, I'm delighted that police have laid the charge, and I understand more. We will discover more about that going forward. You know, there's a man who ran against me in the mayoral race who was charged with a hate crime. And of course, he is now in jail in Calgary for perpetrating 3 more crimes out west. And the judge finally got fed up with him and said, I'm not releasing you because you're only going to go out and reoffend, so I'm going to keep you here. But this is a man who could come back to our community and put his name on a ballot again because he hasn't been charged with any criminal activity. So you know, I don't know how you build in more inclusivity into a community. I mean, I always felt that we celebrated each other's traditions. I feel blessed to live among people from different faiths, cultures, different parts of the world who speak different languages. I accept everyone. I think it's wonderful. But there clearly are people who do not. And I'm hopeful that these are the bad apples among us. But it has been more pervasive lately. And I will say it was more pervasive in the past 5 years when we have a different administration in the United States that seemed to have promoted divisiveness, let's be honest. And then we saw the rise of right-wing groups like the Proud Boys who really advocate hatred. And it was acceptable, and it is not acceptable here. And I have to think we need to continue to send a strong message that hatred is a criminal activity. And it can't be propagated, and we won't tolerate it here. We won't. And, you know, we need to continue to press those charges, chief and deputies, against these people. And, you know, eventually the courts will get it, that we're not going to tolerate this. And they have to impose a very strict, very, very stiff fine in jail terms, because this can't be acceptable. We live in such a diverse culture. People can't go around, you know, beating up each other or running, you know, this individual in London, Ontario, killed people with his car. I mean, it shocks me in our day. Or people walk in with guns into a place of religious worship. They should be sacred places where people pray. So I've just been exasperated lately with the amount of hate crime. So I encourage you, please continue to impose those charges. We need to send a strong message to the courts. And to you, Chair, thank you again for elevating this issue. You make us proud, and I'm so glad that you and the chair of the London board are the flag bearers for this. We need to be steadfast in not accepting hate crimes, especially in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Howell, I see you've raised your hand. If we go to the chief and then come to you, is that okay? Thank you. Chief, would you like to comment?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Chair Etienne and board members. And I know there's still some conversation to be had. I want to first acknowledge that the events in London, as Mark had spoke to initially, have impacted entire communities. We as a police agency recognize that some aspects of our judicial system are, clearly parameters that we have to work within. For example, the state of what type of offenses are available to us are clearly, a federal related matter to impose changes. The existing offenses are, very old, but there is a process there. And as it relates to sentencing, we all also understand that, this is the paradigm for which our crown attorneys and our judicial system operate in. We recognize that our job is to apply and work within the systems, but we do want to acknowledge that there are touch points that I as a chief and us as an organization get frustrated with. And without a doubt, sentencing, and Sharon's here obviously can speak to, she's got a background as a crown also. And then we've got Detective Sergeant Ferris Ishmael here as well that can speak to our hate crime response, and Mark is prepared to speak to that too. But can I just say that we too agree that there are appropriate times for the systems to be applied in a different manner than they seem to be applied on a regular basis. And for example, the sentencing provisions for stacked sentencing or consecutive sentencing presently exists for crown attorneys to ask for and for judiciary to apply. However, we've seen that inconsistently applied nationally. You know, there are been some cases where it has been applied. We know, particularly in the Quebec situation, it's before the Supreme Court for appeal. But that being said, you know, we've seen inconsistent application of bails. You know, I've been quite vocal about high-risk gun and gang offenders or intimate partner members that have been released before the ink's dry. You know, I've got Superintendent Ottaway here behind me, who has commanded our homicide bureau and has seen the outcomes of sentencing as it relates to, you know, pretty egregious homicides. And so, you know, we do believe there's a space to advocate for, especially when you're looking at hate crimes, where you have this added lens that the individuals or the victims are you know, feeling marginalized on top of that. So there's this continued debate between, you know, the Crowns are saying things are too lenient, and defense clearly is saying that it's a charter or constitutional issue where it's cruel and unusual to have you know, the punishment to be too strong. And I guess the call for more attention in these cases, and I would agree both with Chair Attia and Mr. Howell, there are a wide range of public safety and community safety issues that need a loud and clear message. Sorry, Mr. Howell, I know you've got a comment.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Howell.
Thanks, Chief. I couldn't agree with you more. It's one of these situations that's trickle down from the top or starting from the bottom and pushing up. But the problem is insidious. I think the Mayor Bonnie or Mayor Crombie was quite correct, and there certainly is a difference between hate crimes and other types of crimes. But the bottom line, when it comes down to murder, and when the judicial system's easy on that, and that filters all the way down. And as Director Bowden said, they start becoming more and more pushy from the bottom up because they know they can get away with it. You start seeing this problem right across North America, where crime is increasing rapidly in all these cities, including Vancouver. It's not just American cities, but I hate to use Seattle as an example. It got so bad there that shoplifters were no longer being prosecuted. So what happens? Stores are being looted. They're closing Walmarts across many cities in America because they can no longer keep up with the theft and shoplifting. Why? Because these guys aren't being prosecuted at all. Because it's the courts won't keep up with it. The police aren't prosecuting. It becomes insidious. It just keeps building and building and building. Yeah, and you're right. As you said, Chief and Mayor, the society says, well, we're too hard on criminals. Well, that's a policy that we have to decide on. But I don't think as a police service board there's anything more important we can do than ensure that we continue to enforce crime the best we can and not back off when we get pressure from the public. We have to keep this from bottom up and ensure that we enforce crime as we always have. Once you start backing off, it just gets worse and worse. If the courts don't want to put these people in jail, well, we can only do what we can, but we can keep sending them to people. That's all I can say.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. Chief?
Thank you, Chair. I think given that you've created the space for this conversation, I think it'd be appropriate for me to have just two touch points. And one, I'm going to ask maybe Sharon, maybe just for her thoughts. And then second, I'm going to hand it over to Mark and Ish, because I think this is an important platform for us to communicate here in Peel about the standards of, from a preventative, responsive, from a safety and security, investigative standpoint, how we treat and see hate incidents here. I think one of the things at the vigil, recent vigil, that I had an opportunity to say to the community is we also need our community to be confident and reassure them that, we will do all we can to squeeze out every element of hate that comes across our bow, so to speak. We want the community to be reassured when they're out in the public and on the street corners and sidewalks, just as we had intended it to. And that just doesn't happen. It happens with us in advocacy from the board. I completely support that, as well as just assuring them that we got programming. So Sharon, can I turn it over to you quick?
Yeah, I think
I think the comments that you made on sentencing are appropriate and pretty much cover off a lot of it. I think it's complex, and I think, you know, our judiciary operates within a set of principles, including consistency in sentencing and a number of considerations, life sentences, the timing of parole eligibility. It all comes into play, and I think there is a push and a pull. I think, you know, as our officers will say, and as you alluded to, the provisions that the Crowns and we are operating within on the charges are difficult, specifically when we're talking about hate crime. You know, there's not really a hate crime charge, as we know. There's some pretty serious offenses for advocating genocide and things like that need Crown approval. And then we're back to sentencing again, and that any crime that we see that's hate motivated, like for example, you could have a mischief that has a hate aspect, that goes into, again, sentencing principles where it's treated as an aggravating consideration. But again, you have Crowns and judges that are operating within sort of boundaries that they have to make their decisions within in order to make them constitutional. So it is something that requires advocacy, I think, on a federal level in how the criminal code is structured. But right now, we as police have to operate within the laws that we have.
Thank you, Sharon. Mark and Ish.
Thank you, Chief, through the chair. You know, in juxtaposed to what the complexities that Ms. Wilmot just spoke to, from a community and policing perspective, it's pretty simple. We don't tolerate hate-motivated crime or hate-motivated incidents, and we're going to take all the steps we can to squeeze those things out of our community. I'm going to pivot to Detective Sergeant Ishmael Faraz, or Faraz Ishmael, pardon me, to speak to some of the broader context and the things that we do as an organization and as a community to move that piece forward. But I just wanted to highlight that post the incident in London, we mobilized in excess of 100 officers, our 48 DMU officers, our bike units, our foot patrol, our road safety officers, to connect with our community, to connect with our Muslim community. We at the highest levels engage with various leaders across our community, faith communities, focused mainly on our Muslim community, to engage them and listen to them and hear what they wanted and what they needed to feel safe in our community. You know, and we did that and dedicated in it dozens of hours of officer time in 31 locations to reassure our community, to make sure our community felt the safety that the chair spoke to about being able to walk out on the street on a summer's day with no fear. And that is not just a in the moment sort of process. It's one that has continued and will continue going forward. And Ish, if I can kick it over to you to speak to some of the steps that we've taken we had taken prior to London, and you know what we are doing in the moments now and what we're going to be doing going forward.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Thank you, everybody, for this opportunity. Echo what we've been hearing with regards to obviously some of the legislature and some of the limitations when it comes to hate-motivated crimes. Many of you have spoken to some of those particular issues, and please know that we do have a really good working relationship with our Ministry of Attorney General's office with respect to those serious crimes under Section 318 and 319. And yes, that threshold is quite high, and that does and has on occasion posed a problem. But I think as we continue to build our internal capacity and our understanding and our awareness and in our kind of our investigate, knowing the investigative nuances that exist within those files, I think as an organization, you'll see that we will continue to lay any appropriate charges that certainly meet that threshold, and continue to consult with our dedicated crime attorneys in that context. With respect to some of the sentencing issues, 718.2, that aggravating factor with respect to assaults or mischief that are motivated by hate, I certainly believe, and I say this with all humility, that there is an opportunity there for us to be able to make it significant. Include in there maybe some type of counseling, some type of rehabilitation, and we are working with our crowns and with the systems in various, both internally and externally through federal and provincial groups to kind of figure out what we can do to kind of help better mobilize that and move forward, because whether it meets that particular threshold of 318, 319, and in particular the majority of those that we've laid have been under the willful promotion of hatred umbrella. In fact, we still have an ongoing live file with that particular individual that you noted, Mayor Crombie, and that is a live case, and he was in fact charged, and we are going to certainly see that through its fruition as time goes on, regardless of where he chooses to live at this time. But to kind of deviate back to that and kind of internally talk about some of the things we've done, I know that the chief and the deputy and many of you have uttered the word reassurance, and I want to just, in a pragmatic kind of tangible context, just let you know what that looks like in Peel Region. For us as a service, anybody, and we've mandated this since early 2018, anybody that makes any report of hate, whether it meets a threshold or not, anything from a slang term to all the way to an assault and more, immediately activates a response by us as an organization, in which within 24 to 48 hours we will connect with those victims and provide them that wraparound support that almost a pre-existing CSWB framework, so that we can connect them with the right services and agencies. And there have been occasions where we ourselves as officers will visit those families. I know myself and many of my colleagues have met with them personally after such incidents, and at times have to sit down with their kids who are trying to comprehend and understand why these things are happening. So we believe that from the reassurance context, that does several things. And I think it's important that we note that. One, yes, we're able to better mitigate that ripple effect of fear in the community so that it doesn't mobilize into anything more problematic. Beyond that, we also know, and it's been noted, that hate-motivated crimes are the most underreported of all crimes, and that is actually globally, and the research is there to substantiate that. And there are various reasons why, and I think we can all understand and comprehend some of the limitations as to why people would feel afraid in order for retaliation, or maybe because historically the police hadn't dealt with those things in a serious manner, because they understand that within our current criminal code context and the charter that there are freedom of speech things that we have to take into consideration. However, for us as an organization, anybody that makes that immediately solicits a report that's put onto paper so that we can in fact follow up with it. That makes its way to our Equity and Inclusion Bureau, where we again touch base with those respective families and mitigate that spread of hate and fear. But what it also allows us to do is better capture and understand the perpetrators that are committing those, because we need to understand something. I mean, these things don't happen in silos. These individuals that mobilize and radicalize the violence, it starts somewhere. It starts with hate, it starts with bias, and the more that they are emboldened, the more that they are empowered, and every time that they get away with it and they're never held accountable, well, you can see, and the research has shown and demonstrated that that ultimately leads to their behavior potentially and gradually becoming more problematic, leading to violent events. When we talk about what happened in London, I've read some articles where, that term, lone wolf, and yes, it certainly was a terrorist incident. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But when we talk about, that lone wolf ideology, I'm a big believer that nothing happens in a silo. That individual, there are multiple potential intersection points where law enforcement could have been made aware. Maybe if people had reported some of his pre-existing behavior, some of those things could have been done. Maybe some of that preventative method would have, hopefully saved the lives of those, innocent folks that were out for a walk, donning their traditional gear. And again, these are some of the things that are going to be important for us. So also understanding the perpetrators, making that door knock and letting them know that their report has been made. And sometimes that in itself, that preventative method in itself, could have a positive impact. And then it also allows us to better track and understand some of the potential behaviors. If we start to see the same perpetrator come to light, we see that the behaviors are growing and expanding, maybe there's an intersection point there. Maybe we can connect with the perpetrators at an early point and get them the help they need. Maybe we can rehabilitate them the best that we can. And we need to try everything. And I think this is where that reassurance piece is certainly going to be significant and strategic and on a variety of fronts, and not just, on creating that security, which is of course going to be a key element. Internally, as far as our internal capacity within this, we have layered in various forms of training at different intersections throughout people's policing career. Our officers through various forms. In fact, I just presented just several days ago to our new incoming recruits, and we talked about hate and its broader impact. And within there was a big component on anti-Semitism, on Islamophobia, anti-Asian hate, and the spread of those, and also the nexus between hate and violent extremism, because I think we can't ignore that, and we have to be able to understand it. But there was also a huge component in there about cultural awareness, sensitivity, understanding, the ability to empathize, the reality that most people, when they are having that worst day, when they are now the victim of hate, will call the police, and our officers are the first response. We are their hope. We are the only call that they can make in many cases. So we need to be there. We need to be able to empathize, understand what those issues are. We can collect that information and we can provide them that wraparound support. And we're going to continue as an organization to build our internal capacity through this training. This training has now, made its way. We've created courses at the Ontario Police College that we as an organization help co-teach. And there's a Public Safety Canada embedded evaluation process in that. And the evaluation has been extraordinary. And as we continue as a whole in police, as law enforcement, to better understand and know how to navigate these issues, I think, because we also know that these issues are transient. We also know that what happens not just in London, what happens across the world has a regional impact here because of the diaspora and because of some of the, ill effects of the hate and ignorance that they are then subjected to. So, and the one last thing I want to touch on is, this concept of, online hate and cyber hate, as, Chair Atia has mentioned. I think that is one thing that we are better understanding. And I think most of you have seen, there's some new legislation just within the last week that's being, moved down through our federal government. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. That certainly adds another element of a punitive potential piece that could be put in place, peace bond and otherwise, to kind of help, deter and, rehabilitate, and if not, hold accountable some of those individuals that are, creating that. But within the online space, as Chair Atia had mentioned, these are digital echo chambers. These are where individuals come into these spaces. They're drawn in because of the social context. They're drawn in because many of them may feel isolated or, unwanted, undesired. And then they come into these, groups, and the groupthink ideology blends in. And all of a sudden, when you have these echo chambers without any counter narrative, you could see how individuals would be drawn into that. And that's how this information and this rhetoric gets amplified. It gets amplified in these social settings. So when these individuals then exit those settings, once they've rationalized the use of violence and commit the crimes, people will say, well, they did it individually. No, they didn't. There are many other individuals that help mobilize to that. And I think that's why the online piece is going to be so critical for us as law enforcement more generally to be able to move on with. And the unfortunate reality is it shouldn't take these, massive incidents of deep, tragic sorrow for us to start seeing. We've known this for some time. And I say this with some, and I think like most of you, there's I can hear it in your voice. There's that a little bit of anger and a little bit of, how have we not seen this coming? We've been talking about it. We've seen it coming. So I think we need to continue as an organization to push forward and make sure that we understand and work with our external partners to make sure that online hate is mitigated. And I hope that some of this new legislation is going to allow us and give us the autonomy to be able to better investigate and deal with those. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to you, Deputy.
Ish, I think we appreciate, the fact that you highlighted the level of investment Peel Regional Police has put in over years, and we just want to acknowledge that you're seen on a variety of stages as an expert in this regard with our partners. So thank you so much for I said recently that we've had other organizations call us to inquire how our approach response programming has been. And so thank you, Ish, and Mark, please convey the regards to the team as well. So with that, Chair T, I think we'll hand it back to you.
Any final remarks from the board? Mr. Bowden. Mr. Bowden, can we just have, Ron had put his hand up. We'll just hear from Ron first and we'll come
It's okay, Mr. Bowden, can go ahead.
Yeah, okay, go ahead, Mr. Bowden. Okay.
You know what, we could spend the rest of today talking about this. If you if you talk about people not feeling safe to go for a Sunday walk, how about the 10 people whose lives were lost on Yonge Street in April 2018? 10 people who lost their lives, 16 people who were badly injured. Some of them won't walk again. How many, there's people there walking down the street, and they weren't targeted because of their religion. They were targeted because of their sex. So when crimes are committed, and I think this is a time for us as a board to make a stand and make a statement of what we believe as a board, that we have to have a better focus on, and let the justice system have a look again on concurrent and consecutive, and for anybody to say, well, the Crown Attorney can make that decision, whether it's concurrent or consecutive. One person makes that decision. Who tells that Crown Attorney? Is it the head Crown Attorney in that area? Is it coming through the AG's office? I don't know. I think we need to make a statement as a board, and I think the Big 12 boards are meeting soon. I think we just need to make a statement that it's unacceptable, and that the justice system allows somebody to do what happened in London, or what happened in Quebec City, or what happened in Yonge Street in 2018, and only have to serve the sentences rather than consecutively. I think we need to make a stand. I know we could spend forever. I'll get off my high horse.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. Mr. Chada.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just want to thank Ish and obviously mainly Ish for the wonderful, important highlights you have just mentioned. Initially, I thought you were going to give us a virtual tour of the property when you start walking, but interestingly, I really, those were some really good points. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. With that, if there's no further comments, I'd actually like, if it's okay with everyone, if I can put a motion forward. I think there is a space for advocacy on this, a space for discussion. My sense is other police boards, other police services want to take some, make some movement on this. And from what I heard from Sharon and both Ismail, there is some space here to improve the system on hate-motivated crimes. And so I'd like to propose a motion that the Peel Police Services Board and Peel Regional Police work with our partner agencies to advocate on behalf of victims to the various levels of government. Are there, Mr. Bowden? You second that? Is that okay?
Yes, I would second. I would second that. Sorry, Chair.
Chair Yanika.
Just a thought, support the conversation fully. Something you might want to consider, though, procedurally. You're more than welcome to introduce it. Wasn't on our agenda, so anybody that didn't check out our agenda, didn't know you were going to discuss the matter and maybe lead to a motion. It might be very appropriate, because I don't think legislation's happening in the next few, to put it on our next agenda, and that way the world knows exactly what we're doing. If you think it's of great importance today, we can move a motion, I think, to say, let's deal with it today. But boy, I like the idea of it being on an agenda, because others who may have had a thought on it said, we looked at your agenda, we didn't know you were going to discuss this in any great detail. And I think it might serve even a better purpose if you might want to consider, unless the board feels strongly that, no, we've got to get to the MPs and the MPPs right away, but just something you might consider, Chair, that as a notice of motion, you want it as the first item on our very next agenda. Everybody knows what we've done. It's been very transparent. We can have a more fulsome conversation. People might like to write in an MP, just something you might consider, and I'm happy with whatever the board chooses to do.
I'll welcome comment from Rob on this, but to bring your attention, I don't think we have a meeting for a number of months, and this is kind of a topic of, a current topic, and there's opportunity here if we pass a motion today.
So why don't I do this based upon that rationale that we don't want to lose a couple of months? I think that's a very appropriate reason to proceed. So I'm good. Carry on.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Does anybody have any comment on the motion itself, the text of the motion? It's been seconded. If not, all in favor? So that motion has been passed. Thank you. And thank you to everyone for your remarks on this topic. This concludes the public portion of the Peel Police Services Board meeting. We'll adjourn for 5 minutes and then we'll move into our in-camera through Zoom conferencing. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely weekend.